The Ford Heights Four. The Ford Heights Four, Neil Jimison, Dennis Williams, Kenneth Adams, and Willie Range, were formerly imprisoned convicts who were falsely accused and convicted of the double murder of Lawrence Lionberg and Karen Schmall in Ford Heights, Illinois, and later exonerated. Jimison and Williams were sentenced to death, Adams to 75 years in prison, and Range to life. Following the murder in 1978, the four spent almost 2 decades in prison before being released in 1996. This miscarriage of justice was due to false forensic testimony, coercion of a prosecution witness, perjury by another witness who had an incentive to lie, and prosecution and police misconduct. The DNA evidence uncovered in the investigation to clear their names eventually led to the arrest and conviction of the real killers. On May the 11th, 1978, 28-year-old Lawrence Lionberg, who was working a night shift at a Homewood, Illinois gas station, and his 23-year-old fiancée, Carol Schmall, were kidnapped. Schmall was awed several times, and both were shot in the back of the head. There was a public outcry at the brutal murder. The 4 suspects were tried in 1978. A witness, Charles McCraney, claimed to have seen Williams, Range and Adams near the crime scene area in Ford Heights. At the time of the crime, it was known as the East Chicago Heights. A state expert witness, Michael Pudlecki, said that at least one of the arrests was type A secretor blood, shared by 25% of the population, and Williams and Adams had type A secretor blood. An independent forensic witness found in 1987 that Williams and Adams actually had non-secretor blood. Pudlecki also claimed that hairs from the back of Williams' car were consistent with Lionberg and Schmall. No other physical evidence matched the suspects to the crime. A convict named David Jackson testified that he had overheard Williams and Range in jail discussing the murder and R. Jackson later admitted he had fabricated this evidence because he was offered a deal by the authorities. The prosecution eliminated all black jurors from the trial. The defendants were all black and the murder victims were white. Police did not inform the defense that a witness, Marvin Simpson, heard shots and identified 4 men running from the murder scene: Arthur Robinson, Juan Rodriguez, Ira and Dennis Johnson. These 4 were later found to be the real killers. Family members of the Ford 4 testified they were elsewhere at the time of the murder. The defendant's lawyer, Archie B. Weston, was ineffective and was the subject of a legal disciplinary hearing at the time and was later disbarred. A witness, Paula Gray, with an IQ of 55, testified to prosecutors that she had seen the defendant shoot the victims and R. Schmall. However, she withdrew her evidence before the court case, and prosecutors charged her with murder and perjury. Williams was sentenced to death, while Adams was sentenced to 75 years, Range to life, and Paula Gray to 50 years in 1978. Jimison could not be charged, as McCraney had not mentioned Jimison in his testimony, and Paula Gray had withdrawn her testimony. On appeal, the Supreme Court of Illinois reversed the convictions of Williams and Range in 1982 because the defendant's lawyer was incompetent and was the subject of a legal disciplinary hearing. Prosecutors offered Paula Gray a deal to get out of jail if she testified she had seen Jimison, Williams and Range shoot the victims and R. Schmall, which she accepted. In 1985, McCraney had changed his evidence to include seeing Jimison, who was sentenced to death. In 1987, Williams was sentenced to death and Range to life at retrial. Paula Gray was released from prison in 1987. 3 female students, including Laura Sullivan, who is now an award-winning investigative correspondent for NPR, working under Professor David Protess at the Northwestern University Medill School of Journalism, investigated this case and found the Marvin Simpson witness statement testifying to seeing Robinson, Rodriguez, Ira and Dennis Johnson fleeing from the murder scene. Jackson and Paula Gray recanted their evidence. The students also got DNA tests done, which showed Jimison, Williams, Adams and Range were innocent, and eventually that Robinson, Rodriguez, Ira and Dennis Johnson were guilty, which 3 of them confessed. Dennis Johnson had died by then. Robinson Rodriguez and Era were convicted. The Ford Heights Four were exonerated and freed in 1996. Robinson, Johnson and Rodriguez were sentenced to life in prison. Johnson's sentence was later reduced to 65 years. The Ford Heights Four received $36 million in 1999 in civil rights damages from Cook County, the largest settlement in U.S. history at the time. Dennis Williams died from a heart attack at the age of 46 in March 2003. George Ryan, the governor of Illinois, declared a moratorium on the state's death penalty in 2000, citing the Ford Heights Four as one example of men who would have been executed if it had not been for the unpaid work of the Northwestern University journalism professors and students.